Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of How Did We Not Know That? I'm Nat,
I'm Jack.
and today Jack is talking about India, I think. If I remember correctly, I think I saw your notes on the Google
Yes,
Drive.
this is a highly recommended episode by two of my friends, one of our patrons, Isaac, another shout out. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I'm really excited to cover this topic because it's a huge turning point in history
Mm.
for basically the rest of the world too. Well, maybe not the rest of the world. I actually counted the rest of the world. Yeah, like, it's a pretty big event. I think it affects a lot of things, and the topic I'm talking about today, it's the Partition of India. Why did let me just start with that. I'm talking about
Ah.
the Partition of India, and it's
Mm.
a significant event because it's the first of the decolonization efforts of Great Britain, like that imperial power.
Ah.
So this is the first, once we see this, yeah, when India
And
gains
it's like
it.
a domino effect
Exactly.
after
Yeah.
that.
You said it better
Gotcha,
than me.
gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. So the Partition of India, here we go. Just to give a quick overview, to give a quick overview, the Partition of India happened in 1947, and that was the division of British India into two independent Dominion states, India and Pakistan. So let's reel it back to the 1900s. Okay, early 1900s is the end of World War One. So the current state of
Yeah.
India at that time is it's still under British rule. So Great Britain has been ruling India for around 200 years at this point, and the rule started with the
200 years? Sorry, that I
yeah.
didn't realize it was so long.
Yeah, well, that's just the British. So the Portuguese actually also came in a little earlier. So they had been under Western rule for 300 years, but the last
Holy
200 were
crap.
British. Yeah, or
I
English.
didn't know that. Wow.
It was a while. Um, so yeah, there you go. If you didn't know. Right. So the rule started with the British East India Company, which was a company, and then it was later directly ruled by the British Crown. And that time period where India is ruled directly by the British Crown is known as the British Raj. And
Mm.
so people in India are growing very unhappy about economic problems that were a result of rules put on them by the British. And so some of the things that they would do is the people or the British would tax Indians at extremely high rates, and then they would use the revenue from taxes that
Mm.
the Indians just paid to buy Indian goods and then export those goods for more profit. The profit they made from those goods that they were exporting would then go to funding for England. It wouldn't get reinvested in
Uh,
India. So they're making all this money from India, but nothing gets reinvested. They were also very heavily taxed after World War One to pay for the British war efforts and reparations.
mm.
And Indians were also forced by conscription to serve in the British Indian Army. And if you don't know what conscription is, that's basically a draft. So many people in India felt that they did not want to be ruled by the British and they wanted to be self governing. Now, there was some tension between Hindus and Muslims throughout history that would lead to
Mm.
conflict. But for the most part, Hindus and Muslims, Sikhs and Christians could all live together peacefully. And if anyone doesn't know what Hinduism is, or Islam, or Christianity and Sikhism, those are religions. Yeah, for the most part, they could live together peaceful. However, one of the strategies that the British used to conquer India was to actually exploit those conflicts between those groups because then it would weaken the
Oh,
country as a whole. Now,
wow.
right. So, but because of this conflict between Hindus and Muslims became exacerbated. And so, in order to kind of separate those groups and keep them in order, the British would often try to separate them with lines, like drawing lines on maps.
Wow.
For example, in 1905, there was an event known as the Partition of Bengal, which was done by Lord Curzon, who was at the time the Viceroy of India. And if anyone doesn't know what a Viceroy is, that is the governor, or a Viceroy is a governor of a country established by a separate sovereign state. So the Viceroy
Mm.
of India is the governor that is usually British, and they're appointed
Yeah.
to serve and rule over that state. And that the Partition
Gotcha.
of Bengal was later canceled a few years later due to mass political protests. And then we see many Indian organized uprisings against the British government in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And this led to the British fearing further resistance. And so they put in harsher policies towards Indians. So on April 13, 1919, peaceful demonstrators came together at a park in the city of Amritsar to protest British rule. And at this event, without warning, the British General Reginald Dyer, who entered the area with British Indian Army troops, they blocked off the largest exit and then opened fire on the unarmed crowd. And then Dyer had them continue to fire on the crowds even when the people started to flee. And he did not stop until all the artillery had been exhausted from his troops.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so this resulted in 376 deaths and around 1,200 injured civilians. Later on, Dyer was tried for his crimes, and he admitted that he ordered the attack for its moral effect on the people of the region. And when they questioned him later as to why he didn't cease fire, he said that it would have made him look weak. And
Oh
then,
my God.
yeah, the British government later allowed him to resign. But I don't think
Uh,
he faced any persecution, like any criminal
yeah.
charges. And that was that angered a lot of people in India, rightly
Yeah.
so. So this event later became known as the Amritsar Massacre, and that massacre led to an increase in nationalist feelings across India, and it had a profound effect on one of the movement's leaders. You might have heard of him, Mohandas Gandhi,
Yeah.
who was now convinced that India needed to seek full independence from Great Britain.
Mm.
Yeah, because before then, with World War I, he really supported Great Britain's war efforts because he thought it would lead to India's independence. But then after this, he realized that, or it would lead to partial independence. But then after this massacre, he
Yeah.
realized that no, we need to get full independence.
So like he was thinking like, oh, like if we fight alongside them, they'll like give us more freedom.
Yeah,
I
maybe
see, I
we'll be
see. And then that
rewarded.
didn't happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Also, I have a question. It's kind of like irrelevant, but like where does the caste system fall into this? Like, did the British put that into place? Is
That's a
that
really
already
good
there?
question. I don't know. I didn't do research on that, and it didn't come up in my research. So I don't know if that
Yeah.
was a British thing or an Indian. I'm gonna say I don't think it was British introduced.
I would say my guess is probably not because you don't see that in any other like British colony.
Yeah, I think that might
So it's
have been an actual
probably
Indian thing. So after World War II ends, we're in the year 1945, and the British has lost a lot of money in World War II. And just a side note, although Great Britain was on the side of the Allies that won the war, Great Britain really didn't do that much because it was really the Soviet Union and the United States together that defeated Nazi Germany. And it was almost entirely the United States that defeated Japan. So it was a bit like World War II was kind of embarrassing for England because they suffered greatly financially. And then they also, it was just like the British imperial power was not as strong as they used to be, and that was very clear after the war. So they suffered greatly financially, and we start to see the collapse of the British imperial power. With the growing resistance efforts and conflict in India, they can't afford to keep control of India anymore, so they have no choice but to withdraw. In February of 1947, the British government announces that it will withdraw from India. And now that the British have agreed to leave India, the reality of what a sovereign Indian state will look like starts to come to reality. And this is where we see some conflict, what is it called? Get worse. Some conflict in this area.
Yeah, get worse.
Right. And then okay, so political negotiations between British and Indian leaders followed the announcement. So that starts to rise. And I just wrote these notes very badly, so that's why I'm like tripping on my words. But
No,
anyways,
it's okay.
so there were two main representatives that negotiated with the British on what like the newly independent India would look like, and
Mhm.
one of them was, here we go, Jawaharlal Nehru. Yes.
Nice job. Nice one.
And Jawaharlal Nehru, who represented the Indian National Congress Party, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, serving as representative of the Muslim League. So Muhammad Ali Jinnah was concerned that Muslims would be politically disenfranchised in a Hindu majority India, and he called for a Muslim homeland, while Jawaharlal Nehru insisted upon a united India that encompassed the entire subcontinent. So
Hmm.
now the question was not whether or not India would become independent, but as to whether the country would become one or more independent states.
Oh, sorry. I just have a question, like, before you keep going. I guess so, like, Great Britain literally just got up and left peacefully? Or are you gonna get into that? Or, like, they just left peacefully?
Yeah.
What was, like, why did Gandhi do all, like, he had all these hunger strikes, right? And I thought that's why.
Yes, Gandhi led a lot of hunger strikes and the Quit India movement, and that was really great to see all these people coming together to protest British rule. But the reality was that the British were leaving because economically it just wasn't continuing to hold their imperial powers was not working, in combination with the uprisings and the lack of monetary funds. The British decided
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right, cool. Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, so right. So Hindu Muslim antagonism over political power started to increase in late 1946, killing up to 7,000 people. This is just leading up to the independence of India. It's
Whoa,
talking
that's
about
a huge number.
right. Yeah, the
7,000.
rebellions. Yeah, not they weren't even rebellions, but just the conflict between the two groups was really severe. And I was reading British documents of reports from the viceroy back to England and back to the Queen or whatever, back to whatever political parliament, whatever. And
Yeah.
they would just detail the fights between Muslims and Hindus, and like the antagonism between the groups. It's pretty violent. So, anyways, by the time the last viceroy, Lord Louis Mountbatten, arrived in India, it became clear that there needed to be a partition, else they risked a descent into chaos and communal war before power could even be transferred from British to India. And so,
Not looking good.
right. And originally, British Prime Minister, yeah, I'm sorry. Originally, British Prime Minister Clement Attlee set the independence date to be in 1948 to provide more time to sort out the partition and what that was going to look like. However, given the growing conflict between Hindus and Muslims over the partition, the British were really eager to get out of their subcontinental issues, and they advanced the date of independence to August 1947, which was about a year earlier than they had originally planned.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's just gonna be messy.
Yeah. Let's see how that went. On June 3rd, 1947, the plans for independence were announced over radio to the public. Now,
Wow.
partition gets created. So, after the announcement is made, they left the British, let me clarify. After the announcement was made, the British left the monumental task of mapping up the partition to a British lawyer named Cyril Radcliffe, and he was given about 6 weeks to figure it out and set the new borders.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's very rushed, I feel like.
Very fast. I have had school assignments that have given me more time than that.
Longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Radcliffe used outdated maps that showed the percentage of Muslims and Hindus in each region, and then he hastily drew lines on the map to roughly form a political border where none had existed before. And this became known as the Radcliffe Line. So, areas with a majority Muslim population in the northwest and northeast were designated as Pakistan, while Hindu
Mm.
majority areas became India. Now, the big problem with that is that Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, and others had lived side by side in all parts of the subcontinent. So many of the areas that he was looking at would sometimes be 60% Muslim, 40% Hindu, or vice versa. And
Mm.
it wasn't super clear which
Yeah.
side they would fit into because everyone's intermixed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. So overnight, people literally overnight, like this is overnight, people's lives were turned
Oh,
upside down, and those who had potentially grown up in that area for centuries became religious minorities living on the wrong side of a new border. So here we go. The partition
that's
arrives. Oh, you have commentary?
no, that's just I'm like that's just I don't know. Yeah, keep going. I'm just like this is like ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a very real
That
impact
this
because
British guy.
drew a line. Yeah. Some
Yeah. Also, like,
He's not Indian, never lived there, drew a line.
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. It's like the same thing that happened with like Korea. Like it was like just two Americans that literally just drew a straight line, and then let's see how this goes.
Yeah. It's
So frustrating.
anyways, okay. So on August 15th, 1947, India has officially won its independence from the British and is split into two new states that would rule themselves, known as India and Pakistan, which Pakistan was actually split into an east and west area. And side note, the East Pakistan later becomes known as Bangladesh, but that's another
Ah,
episode.
gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah, we could
Wow, so many. It's a huge like this whole subcontinent is like so big. So
exactly. Yeah, and also east and west, very far away. India, the country
yeah,
of India is right between them. So
yeah.
we won't get into it today, but it's a side story. So the celebration was very short lived because the partition line was announced 2 days later, and millions of people had to frantically scramble to get to the correct side.
Yeah, yeah. Like so, there's like a huge migration. You're like, oh crap! Like I'm on the
The
wrong
biggest
side. Gotta go.
migration, one of the biggest
Oh, whoa,
migrations. Yeah.
wow, wow, wow.
So Hindus and Sikhs fled to India while Muslims went the other way into Pakistan, and up to 15 million people were displaced and had to migrate.
Oh, oh my
Yeah,
God! 15 million people.
15 million, but many never made it. So
No.
here's where it gets really, really, really sad.
No.
So during the migration, many people on both sides were attacked and killed in their homes and neighborhoods. So people would hide in bushes and then attack and kill those who were migrating by foot. Trains were packed to the brim with refugees, and during the journey, groups would stop the train and massacre entire what is it, a carriage? Is it called a carriage?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like
Yeah, they
car,
would
like a train
car
car,
yeah, a train car.
carriages.
They would just massacre an entire train car, sometimes the entire train, and then they would spare only the driver so that he could bring the carriage of corpses to the destination. Terrible, absolutely terrible. They would light carriages on
Why?
fire with people in them,
Oh God.
because it was just such conflict between the two groups. And yeah, oh yeah, women and children were assaulted, kidnapped, raped, killed, and abducted in huge numbers.
Mm.
Not a small amount. And men were making women's bodies the battleground of community identity. The populations of entire villages were executed, and the corpses were lining the roadsides. Yeah, it was bad. And the British knew that there was a lot of bloodshed. They knew about the trains, they knew about the massacres between Hindu and Muslims. But since they were done with India, they left it up to them to deal with it.
Oh my God.
Right.
Like
And
not our problem, even though we literally changed the last 200 years of your history, and
right, we
like
drew
they
this
were the like
line causing
they
the migration.
yeah we did
We
this line.
exacerbated differences between you guys so that we could have an easier time ruling.
Ugh. It's so
Anyways,
frustrating.
yeah, so in the end, this was in the end, this was the largest forced migration of people that has ever happened. And which wasn't
Wow.
because of war or famine. So a lot of migrations
Yeah.
because of war or famine, but this was
Mm.
neither, and it was huge.
Some guy, Daniel Radcliffe.
Cyril,
Not,
Cyril,
I know,
not
I
Harry
know. Every
Potter.
time you said it, though, I was like, "Oh my God, what if they're related?" No,
I know, I did
I
look
shouldn't
that
joke
up.
about
I
it,
don't think
but
they're
you
related.
looked it up.
Yeah, I looked it up. I wonder. No, I think he's okay. But anyway, so overall, an estimated 500,000 to 2 million people died, and the partition ranks among the worst human tragedies of the 20th century. Pretty sad. So let's talk about conflict today between India and Pakistan because
Yeah.
there is still a lot of conflict after the
Yeah.
partition.
It's they do not. Yeah, they're not friends for sure.
Yeah, there's just so many issues. So since the partition, there has been conflict between India and Pakistan. Both states have had multiple wars and border fights over territories, most notably regarding an originally autonomous region known as Kashmir.
Mm.
And Kashmir, during the split, they were given the choice to become independent or join one or the other side, and they decided to stay independent. But yeah, that's another story actually. But Kashmir has
Okay.
been going through a lot, and yeah, they chose to be independent at first, but now like Pakistan and India have been fighting over it.
Uh.
And technically they're under Indian rule, but I don't want to get into it. So
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Kashmir is now one of the most militarized regions of the world where civilians are
Mm.
subject to a brutal occupation by the Indian Army. Again, we could talk about this another day because it is a lot. And in the
Mm.
past 20 years, both countries have acquired nuclear weapons, which has become very concerning for the United Nations. And
Yeah.
today, nearly 70 years later, there are still tensions and divisions in the country. Many families have never been able to go back to where their ancestors used to live, and it is very difficult to travel between the two countries, even if you're trying to visit your family and friends. It's just not
Oh my gosh.
possible.
Yeah.
Well, it is possible, but it's not that easy.
Yeah, that's so sad. Like, I don't know. I guess we didn't talk about this when we covered the migration part because we were just like so shocked by the violence. But like, yeah, imagine like you've lived, like your whole family has lived in this one area for as long as you can remember, like all your ancestors and everything, and then you have to move to a completely new place. And India is huge, so I'm sure like every like province, every region is so different, you know?
Yeah.
So, and then if you like, you can't travel with your whole entire family, so you're all separated, and it's
Yeah.
just,
If you're different religions, you can't,
yeah.
which is
Oh my
really
gosh.
annoying. And
And
it's
that's just
somewhere,
like,
if your family's been in this one area for generations, now that there's different
yeah.
states, you need to migrate. That's so weird to
Mm.
feel like an outsider just overnight.
Yeah, yeah, in a matter of days, all of a sudden, your
Yeah. It's
whole
not
life
just a
is like,
feeling too, it was like life threatening if you stayed, which is why a lot of people had to
yeah.
migrate.
And then you were risking your life to leave, you know? So either way, like it was just so dangerous. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But that is the Indian partition.
Wow. Wow, oh my gosh. I'm really glad you did this episode because I guess like reading current events, like I always knew that Pakistan and India had a really tense relationship, but I didn't know the history behind it.
Yeah.
And same with like British rule of India. I didn't realize they were there for so long and then they just left so abruptly. I really thought it was this long drawn out process, but so I'm really glad you covered it. Actually, can I look up something really quick because I remember like last at the end of like last year, India passed this law about like Muslim citizens and I think there was like that they're revoking their passports or something.
Oh
Can
no,
I
I
like
didn't hear about that.
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, so sorry. So in this was December 2019. Wow, why did I think this was literally last year? Wow. Okay, but like basically in December 2019, I remember reading this in the news. Like India's parliament, they passed a bill saying that like they're granting amnesty to illegal immigrants from 3 neighboring countries. So Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. They're like, okay, you guys could come here as refugees only if you're not Muslim. So if you're a Muslim citizen from these countries, you're not allowed to migrate to India. And this was December 2019, so I don't know if the law is still in place. But like again, just like tensions between like Hindu majority, Muslim minority, like it still exists today, and it's really frustrating to hear that. I don't know, like that you said like the conflict was exacerbated by the British, like how many years ago, you know? So
Right.
and like how do you solve that? Like again, like ethnic and religious conflicts like that. How do you solve that? Especially now that there's a hard border, like separating the two groups.
Right. It's
You can't just
really
yeah.
No, I agree. And not to spoil anything, but I'm going to cover another conflict
Ooh.
for my next topic. And just reading about it, I don't know how it's going to get resolved. I hope it all gets resolved.
Yeah.
I understand kind of how much animosity both sides probably
Mm.
hold towards each other because of everything that's happened. So
Mm.
it's tough.
Man, it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
International
Well,
relations is not easy. Foreign
yeah.
policy is so hard.
Foreign policy is so difficult. And then again, like not to go on a tangent, but then like today, it's like when we look at like India, Pakistan relations, there are so many other countries that want to have a say in how the conflict is resolved, you know? So like within the UN, like I know like nuclear weapons is like a really big deal because both countries are like, you know, like increasing their nuclear weapons. But then it's like you have all these other like Western countries and then like neighboring countries who all like want to have their say in the matter, and
Yeah,
so it just makes everything even more complicated. So I don't know,
right.
hopefully this can be resolved diplomatically, peacefully, and
No, I
yeah.
agree. And just to add on to that, it's
Yeah.
interesting you say that because during this time, if anyone's really good with dates, the Cold War is also going on. So with the
Ah.
decolonization of all of these British imperial territories,
Mm.
they these newly independent nations often feel like they have to choose a side, which is
Yeah.
the Soviet Union or the United States, who were the two global superpowers at the time. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that introduces a whole nother realm of conflicts because you have to choose a side or stay neutral.
Yeah.
And you're such a
Are you
tiny
communist,
country.
capitalist?
Exactly. And you're scared about maybe getting invaded based on what side you choose. So it's just so
Jeez.
much
Oh.
complexity.
Wow, that's crazy. I'm so glad you covered this topic. Thank you so much for sharing. You did a great job. Yeah, hopefully people learned a lot, and it puts everything into perspective, especially like we talked about a couple of former British colonies here. So this
Mhm.
really started the whole domino effect. And yeah, we can learn a lot from it. So yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah. Bye.